With that being said, I'm going to start off today with something that a classmate of mine, Jameer, sent me. This is a blind watch, and this is why we're going to do it up front. Because for all I know, this could be a flop on my end, my reaction to this. But he wanted my take on this video, and I said, "Of course, I'll watch this video. I'll watch it on the stream and give my take on it." And I saw that it was Elizabeth Warren, and I was like, "All right, we'll see. We'll see what this is." So, 100%, this is a blind watch of this clip. It's from TikTok, so I think the second I pull it up, it's going to start playing. But I think this is an interesting way to do this. This blind go at it. I think it's maybe a potential segment that we could do here and there when we just have blind takes, but as long as it's within reason, and I won't get banned or demonetized for some. Well, not demonetized. I'm not monetized, but banned or removed or any of that stuff for this. But on that topic, real quick, I threw it in the chat. But while you're here, help us grow the channel by subscribing, hitting the button down below, hitting the thumbs up while you're doing it, hitting like. I know it's a little thing, it seems stupid. It really helps small channels like us grow. So with that being said, let us dive into this clip. Let me see if I can make this. I don't know if I can make this full screen, so I'm just gonna. Oh, nope, it's not. Oh, that'll probably do. So this will be. It looks like not Colin Powell. The guy, the chairman of the Fed. I believe getting interviewed and grilled by Elizabeth Warren.
Will continue raising interest rates as you plan. Unemployment will be 4.6% by the end of the year.
It's not an intended consequence.
Jerome Powell.
But it is, and it's in your report.
So just to reiterate, because I was talking over that, Elizabeth Warren talking to Jerome Powell, who's the chairman of the Federal Reserve, which is if you go back, this is why Jameer sent this to me. If you go back a couple weeks ago, we talked about the concept of modern monetary theory as it applies specifically to the United States. Inflation and unemployment are impacted by the Fed, by their interest rates hikes and, in theory, cuts. And as we have seen lately, the Fed has continuously been raising interest rates. Now, what Elizabeth Warren here is talking about, as I'm probably sure she'll talk about here in a second, is that there is an inverse relationship between a somewhat inverse relationship between unemployment and inflation. They are two pieces of a very complex, in some fashion, equation. As inflation goes up, in theory, not the reason necessarily, but a reason that could happen is by increases in wages. Now, that is not what, as we've talked about, has been going on here in the United States. Wages have slightly gone up. Real wages actually slightly have gone up, but the real impact here is supply chains. As an accountant, I can tell you too, when we talk to clients, it's not that there's issues of demand, it's issues of supply. Okay, so let's see what else Elizabeth Warren has to say here.
Report, and that would be about 2 million people. If you could speak directly to the 2 million who you're planning.
So the way that they come up with these numbers too is specifically from the Congressional Budget Office, which will look at how different policy changes will impact, employment, inflation, the budget, all these different aspects of the economy. Now, I have to assume that's where these numbers are coming from. I don't know this full context of this, but if Elizabeth Warren is saying 2 million, it's probably from a CBO score or some sort of score that measures the interest rate hikes. Now, again, as I was saying, it's inverse. So as the inflation will go up, technically there should be a maybe not equal and opposite reaction, but a reaction on the employment side. The way that the Federal Reserve is trying to control inflation is by raising interest rates. And if you raise interest rates, businesses will have a harder time borrowing money. They borrow money from banks. Banks can technically borrow money from the Fed, or they get it through deposits, right? So all this is to say is if a business can't get funding, they are more likely to be able to not be able to pay for new employees, for new machinery, for new rent, or you know what I mean by that, new real estate. I'm sorry, but all this is to say, when you raise the interest rate, the goal is to curb inflation by punishing labor and increasing the unemployment rate. That is how you curb inflation. It's inverse. So as unemployment rises, the inflation rate would technically go down. Now, just while we're on this topic, the concept of stagflation, which is what happened in the 1970s, is where unemployment rises while inflation rises as well. That is a major, major economic disaster. So if that happens, you're in trouble. But that is not where we're at right now. Unemployment, for those who maybe haven't listened to previous episodes, is at a record low, a near 50-year record low. And we'll talk more about some of that stuff throughout the episode, I'm sure. But the point being is, if unemployment is so low, as I'll tell a quick anecdote before we finish this clip. Talking to an older employer, or an older, not someone I work with, but somebody that works in the field, was talking about how younger people don't want to work. And I am puzzled by the continued perpetuation of this notion where young people don't want to work, because it's not that young people don't want to work. It's that young people refuse to accept the working conditions for the pay that is being offered. We have a 3.6% unemployment rate, which means that most adult working, capable working adults are in the workforce. And for those who aren't, to be considered unemployed, you have to be looking for employment. That also is compounded by the fact that the person I was talking to, I won't say like what they do, because, not fair, but it's talking about younger people not wanting to work, and then talking about, wages in the teens, $12, $13 an hour. And I'm like, I'm biting my tongue because, I'm not looking for an argument. I'll argue on here, but $15 an hour, which is like what the average progressive, even at this point, the average Democrat is pushing for, is in the mid $30,000 pre-tax per year. So you can't afford a house, you can't afford a car, you can't afford childcare, you can't afford to do all the things that a normal working adult would need to do to be a part of a functional society, but they are expected to just take it and to be happy for this wage. And that's where this disconnect is consistently hammered. And this notion here is a disregard for the pain and suffering that unemployment will lead to.
To get fired over the next year, what would you say to them?
Inflation is extremely high, and it's hurting the working people of this country badly, all of them, not just 2 million of them. And we are taking the only measures we have to bring inflation down.
And putting 2 million people out of work is just part of the cost, and they just have to bear it?
Will working people be better off?
So I see burner account in the in the chat. So this was, of course, your video. So I want to respond to what you say in the chat. For those listening, you don't see the chat. It says, corporations don't pay because workers aren't loyal, but workers aren't loyal because corporations don't pay. Now, the idea of a loyal employee, that concept is not novel. That is something that older generations worked one job, one position. They got out of school, high school probably. They got to the factory, they got to the office, and then that was their job. They got promoted, they made more money, they progress, they live the American dream for the most part. Now, again, that's not the case for everybody, and that's definitely not the case for different marginalized groups throughout history. But the concept of a loyal corporation is nonsense. There has never been a corporation, and specifically in today's society, where they will put loyalty to an employee over the profits of the company, because as a corporation, their fiduciary duty is to the shareholders of the company, aka they don't care about this. This is where, when I think about future campaigns, this is the crux of a campaign right here. A politician that runs on stakeholders over shareholders is going to be a monumental concept, because shareholders care about only creating profits. Stakeholders care about the community, the environment, while also considering profits in conjunction with working conditions, work-life balance, all of these things. That's what a stakeholder first economy would look like. And yes, the we are a family concept is a way to manufacture a level of consent with employees to say, yeah, like, I feel welcome here. I feel this and that. And look, there are good employers. That is not to say that employers are bad, but it is to say that corporations have a fiduciary duty to make money, and that is their priority. So when we talk about this in the abstract, we have to look at it as they're going to brand themselves as a family. I mean, look, I'll use jobs that I didn't take. I've been interviewed by companies where they say we're like a family, but that we're like a family is a branding exercise. It is not reality. I've talked to people that worked at jobs that I didn't take, and they're like, yeah, like, I'm working like 70 hours a week. And I mean, this is the accounting field, but like, look, that is branding. There's nothing more to that than branding. I mean, even when you work at a small company, like, I'll put it this way, as we talked about in the chat too, talking about apartments. The way that you create somebody to have an investment in a company, the way that you create loyalty, and this is going to sound radical to some, is the same notion that you would create an investment in a apartment or a house. A renter has no equity in an apartment or a house. A renter lives in the house, lives in the apartment, they pay their money, they expect the landlord to keep up with stuff, right? But when you as an individual own real estate, when you own the apartment, when you own the home, you have an investment in that home, in that apartment, not just in the saying that I want the property value to stay up, but I want to live in a house that I can do what I want. I will spend my money the way that I see fit and improve the house, improve the abode, we'll just say more broadly. It's the same thing with a company. Now, this is where it sounds radical when you talk about this. This is something that, in the abstract could be labeled as, oh, this is socialism, this is this and that and the other thing, but it's not. It's really common sense. If you provide, and it doesn't have to be equal equity, but if you provide employees with equity in the company that they work for, they're going to be more invested, quite literally invested in the company that they work for. They care about the long-term success of the company because it's what depends, their investment depends on their time, energy, money spent in a efficient manner. Versus if you're coerced or, like I said, the manufactured consent of being and forced to be somewhere with no investment other than here's your salary, a lot harder of a sell to say, I'm going to sacrifice seeing my kids or, even just going to see that movie or being a part of my community. And a good employer would recognize some level of that and say, we're going to find this balance. But in modern society, I mean, this is a major tangent from what I planned on starting off with today, but I find it interesting. It's an interesting conversation to have. And that level, again, that level of investment in ownership and in equity is key. Let's see what Jerome Powell has to say here, though.
Off if we just walk away from our jobs and inflation remains
Well,
5-6%. It's not as black and white as very
just
very
looking at the
infrequent.
numbers, it actually is pretty black
Alan
and white.
Blinder's written a book on this, and
There have been 12 times that we've seen a 1-point increase in the unemployment rate in a year. How many times did the economy fail to fall into a recession after doing that? Out of 12 times.
I think the number is 0.
I think the number is 0. That's exactly right.
Right now, the unemployment rate is 3.4%, which is the lowest in 54 years. And we actually don't think that we need to see a sharp or enormous increase in unemployment to get inflation under control. Even 4.5% unemployment is well better than most of the time for the last 75 years.
So that's that. That's my take on it. There are certainly issues. I mean, I would definitely push back and saying, like, look, I believe in a jobs guarantee. I think that having public option for certain jobs as well is useful, and in creating an opportunity for people to work, to make a living wage, to have healthcare, all of these things that shouldn't be necessarily tied to working for a profitable, gigantic corporation that their only goal is to make money. So that's my take on it.